what is it about Florence? What is it about the Renaissance? It's part of our heritage as Christians. We can learn from it and we can remember. And when I found it, it was interesting. I was going through life as a vale of tears, and life is harsh and painful and struggling. I guess this was in 1999, 1998. And just life was painful and a struggle. And there's times when you do go through that, but I didn't have any, you feel God, you have the beauty of God, but sometimes it feels far away. And anyways, then I found this it's not, it doesn't supplant God or anything, but it was just like God was moving on the earth. And it's good to see, in history, how God moves on the earth through people and civilizations, how he transforms. And for example, one thing I think we all need to know is about John Wesley, how he transformed England in the 1700s. Did amazing stuff. Florence, again, is something that it started in the 1300 and then percolated. And you can see this transformation. Again, and part of it is democracy. So this is something that we all have inside us, this sense of democracy, this sense of individualism, that you are an important individual and that what you have to say, think, experience, the wisdom you collect, you gather, you can relay, and that's the democratic form that comes out, that you could influence people. And so we train people to talk, and training people to talk was a really important notion back in the days of early democracy, because you have something to say. So to feel that you have something to say, you have to feel important, you have to feel confidence, and I believe God wants that, because we all want that for our children. We want our children to feel strong in who they are and confident, and God wants you to feel confident and strong in who you are. So to see this in a big way is to talk about art. Now, we come from traditions where we've thrown out a lot of the visual arts in the past. You can look at the early Protestant church, Oliver Cromwell, etc. I've been to churches in England where everything was taken down. And they had a good attempt, I guess, in a sense, but they went too far. And so we're not talking about worshiping images, which is what I believe God was talking about in the Old Testament. But we're talking about speaking through art, having people moved by art, having spaces, having cities and towns enhanced by architecture, by the things you build, by the environments, the atmospheres you create. So really important. And scripturally, you go to Bezalel, and he was the artist who worked under Moses, and he was the first person talked about being filled with the Holy Spirit. So he was an artist, maybe the greatest artist of all time that God rose up, and God was really concerned about art. And so we should be too. And so anyways, a little bit about myself. Trevor mentioned I work with the Vineyard Church right now. I actually started in the airport church in the early 80s. So not to throw names, but anyways, John and Carol married Karen and myself, my wife Karen, way back then. So we were part of that growing movement in the 80s and saw some really crazy stuff. I was converted when I was 20 years old, went to the airport, and then eventually we lived downtown at Bloor and Bloor West Village, which is Bloor and High Park area. And we started a music school there, so a church from the airport went down, and we helped grow that church, helped start that church. So we started a music school, and then a friend came to me in 1998, and she says, why don't you take this course with me? This is the best professor at University of Toronto I've ever had. Come take this course. So I said, sure. And so I go take this course, and it was the history of Italian Renaissance culture, or Italian Renaissance culture and history. And the first thing you noticed were that these professors really embodied this thing, this benevolence, and they were trying to always bring out the best in you, in me, and we were students that were very ignorant and naive, but they were always gracious, and they really embodied. There's some writings of that. A writer named Castiglione, if you've gone to university for literature. Anyways, that's what that embodies. You're trying to bring out the best in people, and that really struck me at the time. And so we took that course. We were blown away, and then we went to summer school in '98. Or no, I guess it was 99. And this, for me, was a real God thing. It actually started me doing tours later on. But we go to the town of Siena, which is an hour below Florence. So Florence is the capital of Tuscany, which really got the ball rolling for a lot of stuff. But Siena was a smaller town, an hour to the south by car. And we just took this course. And it was like God orchestrated it. All these amazing things happened. The sense of community, the experience of Italian food and gelato for the first time. It's actually mind-blowing how they're really, when you go to the supermarket, you have to put gloves on. And I don't know, it doesn't make a difference, but you can't touch. Otherwise, some grandmother will start yelling at you, do not touch the food with your bare hands. There's just this great respect for food. And so, to find the food, or you're walking along and you're all of a sudden you're talking to your friend, and finally you take that first lick of, I had it with a red grapefruit gelato, and it's like, oh my goodness. What happened? Just the flavor. It tastes more real than real. And so, anyways, through all this, just feeling the beauty of the Lord. And there were a bunch of university students. I was in my 30s at the time, so the professors were, I guess, comfortable hanging out with me, but because I was old enough, and so I got their information all the time. And then there were other people our age or some of the younger university students. Anyways, this camaraderie started up. And it was like, wow. And I kept thinking, wow, this beauty, this lightness, this camaraderie, that, this family, we need that more in the church. Now, this church, I think, has a lot of that, so don't get me wrong. But I think we need to bring that to a lot of the church. And in the 90s, when we moved downtown and we started a church there, we ended up going Friday nights to Queen and Spadina, if you know Toronto. And Friday night was our night we would feed the poor, if you could call it that. And so a couple hundred people would come in that night, and we would feed them and talk to them. We'd break up fights and stuff. We'd live through a bit of craziness. But the amazing thing, we would go out after and just hang out together for a bit after the food was over, and we just got so close. And it was that thing about we would eat together, and just, every day, or every Friday for years, we got so close. And so it was a strong, beautiful thing that we felt, that we were so close. And there were about 20 or 30 of us living in this West End part of Toronto. And you could drop in on anyone. You could just hang out with anyone. There was always someone there for you. And I thought, wow, this is the way life was always going to be. Maybe it is here in Stratford. There's a bit more camaraderie in that. But everyone moved away because it's Toronto. It's so expensive, right? And all of a sudden, I'm by myself. But it was that sense of beauty. Now, when you go to, I'll bring it back to Italy. When you go to a dinner in a restaurant in Italy, they usually do not let you leave unless you've spent at least 3 hours there. So you go there, and it's all about you conversing and talking. Usually you bring your family or your friends and you talk, and they really value that. And it's different than here. I understand we have to make money and all that, but they somehow beat that, and it's about you hanging out together. And they love people sitting in their restaurant looking full and having a good time and hanging out together. So anyways, we take this course, our minds are blown, and so maybe we'll put up number one, Matthew. So it's, the question I have, and I've been studying for years, is this is the city of Florence. It's got the Great Dome. It's got various landmarks. It's got City Hall to the left, the tall tower. It's got the bell tower for the church right by the big dome. And there's something about this city that just draws millions of people each year. And so my question is, what is it about this city? So this city, by 1400s, just started churning out thinkers, artists, technology, all the things we are, this idea of the individual, that you are important as an individual. This, and it's not a perfect city, so I'm idealizing it a bit when I talk. So there's a lot of mixture. There's a lot of bad stuff that happened there, but there's a lot of good stuff. And so when you look at old, let's say, Renaissance Baroque buildings we build in Canada, or, the White House in the United States, I believe it's because of this city that they're trying to emulate, ancient Greece, ancient Athens, as well as the democracy that happened in Florence. And they just, so by in the 1300s, they're a population of 120,000 people, and then by 1348 they get the plague, one of the greatest calamities of all time in human history, and they lose half their people. And so there are, the 120,000 people was one of the biggest cities in Europe at the time, and then there's 60,000 people, and they're still one of the biggest cities in Europe because the whole population of Europe has been cut in half. And yet they go, so this is the size of my Bloor West Village area in Toronto, but these guys go and pump out artists and thinkers and just innovation after innovation. You can go downtown to their art gallery, and they've got this lineup of all the great thinkers, like they made statues of them. Anyways, not to compare, but I don't think in Bloor West Village we're not producing Michelangelo's and Leonardo da Vinci's quite the same, although maybe I'm there, so I'll put myself up musically. So the question I have is, okay, how did they do it? And so I have to do a bit of history here. So they start off as a really strong city in the 1300s. Their money becomes the money of Europe, them and Venice. So you might have heard of the florin, so from Florence, the ducat from Venice. So those become the two. Now Venice is easy because it's on the sea, and they have a big navy, and they became the middleman for Europe, where Florence is inland an hour by car. And so they couldn't have access to the sea. So they ended up having to think through. So the problem became their greatest innovation. And they end up doing wool cloth, and they become super rich, so much so that their money becomes the money of Europe. And so let's go to number 2, Matthew. So this is in Tuscany. So you're coming out of the Middle Ages, and this is medieval art, Middle Age art, and this is Daniel. It's a sculpture on top of a column in a church in Tuscany, and this is Daniel in the lion's den. And you see Daniel in the middle. And it's not about Daniel or the people. They don't have a lot of character. You can't sense a lot out of them. But it's about them living through a spiritual thing. It's about the spirituality of it all. But there's a little bit of a disconnect between reality. So let's go to the next one. So all of a sudden, the Renaissance comes, and it's important life on earth. And if you look at the characters on the left side, they're actual people. You can sense who they are. You've met some of these people, probably in cafes somewhere. and you can sense their character in that. And yet there's real trees, there's real landscape, there's real animals, there's real situations happening. And so this shift happens that brings, again, this sense of the earthly in a good way, that we are alive on planet Earth. And that, you know, Trevor mentioned Genesis. One of the scriptures right after that is, you know, God looked at all of his creation and he said, this is very good. And you're starting to see that connection, that earthly connection. So let's go to the next one, Matthew. So this is my my adopted hometown in Italy, and it's called San Gimignano. And to understand Florence used to be a city of towers like this is. Now this became a backwater city. It's a World Heritage Site now, and everybody goes there. Millions of people go there. It's so beautiful there. But they have their towers left intact. It's really the only city I know of that has its towers. And this is life in the Middle Ages. So I'll bring in Romeo and Juliet. If you were a Montague or a Capulet, you owned a tower. And so you would fight other people, other families from your tower, or you had a place to go and run and hide. And society was much more chaotic, and you know, you would have other families you were connected to, so you could connect, but there would be family, you know, again, just like Shakespeare got it in Romeo and Juliet, Montagues and Capulets. And so this is life in the Middle Ages. Now Florence ends up, again, the history, they get this population of people that become the great merchants, and they're not nobles. So the nobles are bullying everyone around. They walk around with little armies of thugs, and they push people around. They fight other families. You're trying to do your merchant wares in the main piazza, and all of a sudden, just like in Romeo and Juliet, a fight breaks out, and your nephew got hurt or something, and so you don't like the nobles, and the nobles are treating you really poorly. So it's beautiful to look at. The first time I came upon this city, we were in a bus, and you can sort of tell the hills are so angular. It's really a unique part of Tuscany. And you're going there, and I remember just being so overwhelmed by the beauty there. And so when you go to the art gallery in Florence, the poet Stendhal did in the early 1800s, and he was overcome by beauty that he actually fainted. And so it's called the Stendhal syndrome, that you would find beauty in your life and you would be overcome by it. It's one of the great joys. Now, I think maybe easy to sense is music. You find the band you like, or the classical music you like, whatever, and you're moved by it inside. And I think we've all hopefully experienced something like that. You can also get it with atmospheres of walking in this town. When I go on these tours, I take people at 11 o'clock at night into town, and because in the day it's so packed with tourists, because it's such a beautiful town. But you go at 11 o'clock, all the tourists are gone, and it's like you're walking in 1200s. You're walking in the 1200s there. It's so cool, and it's so beautiful. So anyways, the point, all Christians, we should have Stendhal syndromes, that you should be moved by beauty, that you should, you know, again, in worship, we should feel God and be moved by his beauty. Psalm 90, and let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So my hometown, San Gimignano. So Florence, there's this merchant class, and they're smart and they're good. They're making a ton of money, and they end up slowly overthrowing the nobility. They take up, because they're good organizers. Let us organize this. Let us organize that. And the nobles say, yeah, that's okay. They're kind of they're thugs, right? A lot of them. And they got this chivalry thing and, live by the sword, die by the sword. And eventually they say, there's a militia in town, a city militia. We'll organize it for you. We'll look after it. And they say, sure, why not? So they do it, and all of a sudden they got the power. And they end up overthrowing the nobility. And so they throw the nobility, and in 1294, they pass the Ordinances of Justice, which says that no one who is noble can stand in government. Now, it became more lax as the centuries went on, but it was about the regular people like us, regular people organizing, doing the best they can. And so Florence in 1294 sets up a democracy and a meritocracy, meaning it depends how you get value in society for how well you do your job, for how well you do business, etc. And we are descended from that. And this town San Gimignano is the only one left because it became such a backwater, but all the towns in Tuscany all had to chop down their towers. And we have that. What's the tallest tower in town today? In Toronto, it's the CN Tower, but in this town, it's City Hall. And that was a Florentine thing. It was like power is municipal power, the power of your city is a centralized, secular organization. And so everyone is answerable to the law. Everyone had to follow. And so it took it away from all the families and the nobilities. Now again, I know scholars of the Florentine Renaissance would argue with me and stuff, but that's the ideal thing. And so it's sunk in the minds of the people that, hey, you're free. You can think freely. You can conduct yourself freely. When I say think freely, it's at the end of Judges. It's interesting. There's all these hints God has in there of all these great things that we're supposed to latch onto, and they seem inconsequential. When God says, "Oh, this is very good," you've read that at the beginning of Genesis. This is, God saw that it was good. Well, if you don't see the world as good, you can't work in the world. You can't conduct yourself in the world. You have to relate to God on that. Now, there's a balance. You want to put down sin, etc. Absolutely. But you have to feel the benevolence of God to be able to do something. So at the end of Judges, it says this little blurb, everyone did as they saw fit. When the judges were in, and God was upset because they were going to put in kings because all the other countries have kings, so we have to have a king. And they were missing the point. And God just puts this little blurb, and everyone did as they saw fit. You were free to think. You were free to act. You were free to, and the hope is, because it's God, that we're benevolent, that we do good in society, right? So anyways, Florence, they turn into this democracy and think tank where you can think freely, and they percolate in it for 100 years. So let's go to the next one. And two writers come out of that, which I'll mention briefly, Dante on the right and Petrarch on the left. And their literature is all about the soul, about their souls. And with Dante, you've probably heard of Dante, the Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno, etc. It's all about the individual dealing with God. And it's God of the Middle Ages. It's what I would think is faulty theology. God's not an angry God in the sense that he felt it, but he was dealing with stuff. So that the individual became important. Petrarch on the left wrote all these love poems, and it was about the soul. It's not about the love itself, it's about the soul and how the soul works in love. And so we have that. It's already in the Bible, in a sense. We've got King David in the Psalms. And so Psalm 10, why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why do you hide in times of trouble? So, God's not far off. Maybe he was back in the Old Testament, but there's times when you feel that. And so God's allowing David to vent his feelings. Psalm 13, the beginning. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Problems of life. So, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? Well, I think David knows he's not going to be forgotten forever, but you're going to feel like you're forgotten forever. And so David's portraying the soul, and it's just like what these guys are doing, but these guys are rediscovering it in a sense. There was no printing press. They weren't reading Bibles like we do today, but I think we need to be reminded of these things. So Psalm 16, O Lord, you are the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You maintain my lot. The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Yes, I have a good inheritance. So the soul, that you would set your heart, that you would enforce the things of God. Yes, I have a good inheritance. We all know that, but sometimes you need to say, yes, I have a good inheritance. So you have to convince yourself of God. You're the setter of your heart. And so this idea of the individual that comes from that time, we should be growing in that. And we have the Psalms for that. Psalm 34, I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. I will glory in the Lord. Let the afflicted hear and rejoice. Glorify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together. So the soul and triumph and joy. And so there should be times when you feel that triumph and joy, because we're human. And I think, to get, again, historical, my family comes out of a Protestant Northern German tradition, and there's this sense of burying your emotions. It's in our family. It's in a lot of, let's say, North German culture. It's in a lot of Protestant Northern European cultures. And so you want to not go too far. Yes, we read the Bible and we put down the soul, we put down ourselves in a good way where we're not fleshly and we don't, it says do not be angry. But there's times when, oh God, this is unbearable, and it's okay to vent. And so God is writing out this sense of individuality that's already in Scripture. So let's go to the next one. So this is a painting by Giotto in the early 1300s. So he's around the time of those writers, and he's portraying, the deposition of Christ. And Christ has come down from the cross, and you see Mother Mary holding Jesus, and just the pain on her face, and Mary Magdalene holding the hands of Jesus, and you see the anguish. And then just above that is St. John, John the Apostle, and just he's losing it. He's overwhelmed. And this is the first time, when you see that Daniel sculpture earlier, there was no character or emotion in Daniel, but here there's emotion. This is like the soul being born in art, and that it's okay to have a soul. It's okay to be individual, and you see all the different levels of anguish and pain in these characters, and it's the different levels of the soul, the individual responses of the soul. Behind St. John with his arms extended. I don't know why I'm calling St. John. It's behind John the Apostle, it's Nicodemus and Joseph, and they have a different level of sadness. They're not losing it like John, but they're sad. And so this is like the individual being born. Now it's percolating in this city of Florence. And so the idea of the individual. And so I'm seeking again what made Florence great historically to produce incredible art and so on. I mentioned 1348, the plague hits. They lose half their people. So they're percolating in this democracy from 1294. And then in 1399, roughly 100 years later, really interesting part, you never hear about it, is Tuscany has a revival. It's called the Revival of the Bianchi. Bianchi means the white ones. So what you would do is you would put on a white robe, you would carry a cross, and you went village to village singing hymns. And there's all these documented healings and that happened in Tuscany in 1399. And what was really cool is that if you were a Montague or a Capulet, you went to the town or your enemy's town and you asked them to forgive you, and you're wearing a white robe. So there was all this forgiveness. So you saw the towers, the defense, and then this massive forgiveness started to go out. So really awesome stuff. It's interesting, right after this revival, there's an explosion of great art and thinking, and that's the time period we know as the Renaissance. So percolates in the 1300s, bad things happen, like the plague. 1400, they just start producing artist after artist, thinker after thinker. And the Florentines made a joke about it because people would say, how does this little city, it was big at the time, how does this city produce all these geniuses? And the Florentines would go, well, if you could just live by the river Arno, which goes through, if you could live by our river and drink the water that we drink, you would be smart like us, right? Now, it was a joke in a sense, but it's just the confidence. They knew there was something going on in their city. They created a culture. And I think it's really important for the church to create a culture. And so I've been going to Steve and Trisha's art, gathering every 2 weeks. And it's been awesome. And it's just to go and be creative, So I'm talking about art, and art has beauty. So going into this church, it's in Padua, covered with frescoes. Now, your sense of beauty might not appreciate that or like that, but you have your own sense of beauty. And so beauty is one of the most powerful forces on the earth. And that's why I think God set up Bezalel to do that, to bring beauty in the early creation of Israel. Amazing stuff. So let's go to the next one. So I had to do it. I had to bring Mona Lisa into this. So the sense of the individual gets heightened. And, we live with it today, that you are an important individual, but yet we have to work as a group. So Adam and Eve were conversing with God. They were individually talking to him, but then they leave the garden, and then they have to go and they have to work and form societies eventually, provinces, towns, countries, and that's the problem in a lot of world history, is that these places never got along. So that's our challenge. Can we make groups work? Can we make our church work? Can we make, I'm going to a vineyard church. We've had a bit of history in the past, but can we, I had a great word this morning. I forget by who, but that, there's a sense of a bridge happening. And not that we're the same, but that we're brothers, we're sisters, we're brother and sister, that there's a love for the body of Christ. And I feel God pushing me, because there are some Christians, and I believe they're Christians, but they don't like what I believe, or that I believe miracles can happen, etc. The cessationists and that. And yet, they're your people. They're, they're still your people. You just gotta, hopefully not roll your eyes, but just take it and just love them. And great things happen with love. So Leonardo is the outcome of this idea of the sense of the individual. And Mona Lisa is, she's such a cliche now, unfortunately, but she's one of the greatest paintings of all time in the world. And so Leonardo does something amazing with her. First, there's so much detail and shading. It's absolutely incredible. Now, this is not going to do it justice. If you get to see it in person in Paris, it's absolutely amazing. But you can sort of tell the shading, how it just goes from light to dark. It's so subtle. And that behind the Mona Lisa, there's all this not confusion, but it's not clear. And so she stands out all the more because it's not clear, but she's so clear that it's more vivid, it's more real than real. And so Leonardo's concerned with the soul, the individual, and how good it is. And so when you look at Mona Lisa's eyes, at times she's looking at you, and then at other times she's looking past you. And the joke is that when Leonardo painted, he always had jugglers and clowns around him. So she was smirking at, this menagerie, this craziness in front of her. But so anyway, she's looking behind you, she's looking at you, and you'll see part of her mouth goes up, and she's smiling. And another time, and the other side of her mouth isn't; it's more straight. So at times she's looking at you, and she's smiling. At times she's looking past you and she's smiling. At times she's looking at you and she's not smiling. At times she's looking past you and she's not smiling. And so you sense this person come to life right before you. Now, it's just a flat surface. It's just paints. But the thing to sense is that there's an individual there. You can sense this character coming out of her. You can sense this soul, and she's slightly turned because there's a movement to her. So she's got a movement of her body, but she also has a movement of her soul. And so the individual rises at this time. And let's go to the next one. So Leonardo, he has to believe in goodness, the goodness of the soul, the goodness of his soul. And he's had a hard upbringing. He was sort of forsaken by his father, but he ends up getting it together. And this is a drawing of a ball bearing. So the guy invents the ball bearing. The guy invents scuba gear. The guy invents the parachute. The guy invents the hang glider. The guy does the first aerial view of a map. He's the first one to figure out heart disease. He does the first diagram of a baby and a fetus inside a mother. He does all the anatomy, which was not allowed to do, but he made buddies with a priest who gave him, he was allowed to go cut up cadavers, which is what artists and doctors do, and he diagrammed exactly the human body. So he's unbelievable. He does scuba gear. He invents the submarine. He invented a bunch of bad things that had to do with warfare, like the machine gun. He invents the robot. So he made a robot, and I think I threw my pen at that point. He invents a robot, and this, I guess it was a crank up. There was no electricity at the time, but it could serve, do you ever go to Swiss Chalet and they have those robot machines that serve lunch and, your chicken? He invents one of those things that comes out and serves hors d'oeuvres at a party in Milan. So innovative, so that he could look at the world and say it was good. You have to be able to look at the world and say it was good like God did, so that you can do the things you have to do in life. And that you to do that, even before that, you have to believe you are a noble creation of God. And that's what the Florentines did. So what made Florence so great, I'm giving you my secrets or whatever. It's not a secret. But my learning over the years is that they had what was called the energizing myth. The energizing myth, that you believe in your town, in your city, that you believe you are good, that you believe in who you are in a good way. And so this is the opposite of Gnosticism, right? So Gnosticism, which Trevor mentioned earlier, is in the sense that that everything spiritual is good and everything physical is bad, to put it in a nutshell, right? And so that's not true. There's benevolence behind this physical world that we live in, right? Again, not to confuse it, we have to overcome sin, we have to do all the good stuff, putting down our fleshly self, but if you don't believe in yourself in a good way, have the confidence that you are a son, a daughter of God, how are you going to be able to do anything, right? How are you going to be able to look at the world? And then if you don't believe that the world is good underneath it, that God's amazing creation has benevolence to it, has goodness to it, has reason that you can look for answers, right? Then how can you do anything? So the energizing myth, and so that's one thing to leave with Christianity. As something to ponder about. I quoted Genesis 1:31, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good, so that we hold that balance. So let's go to the next one. So this is one of the great frescoes of all time. It's by it's middle 1400s by an artist called Piero della Francesca. And he encapsulates a lot of this thinking. And so you've got Christ rising from the dead. You've got the soldiers sleeping. Now, you have to mention, this is in a town called San Sepolcro. And in World War II, the Germans were slowly beating up Italy. And they hid out in San Sepolcro at one point, and the British started shelling this town. So Anthony Clark was the British major, and all of a sudden he says, stop shelling the town. And he'd remembered a paper he'd read by Aldous Huxley about this fresco, how this is one of the greatest frescoes of all time. So we have this fresco left because, and I always give a cheers for my coffee or whatever. Thank you, Mr. Clark, for not destroying the city and not bombing it. And you can go to this fresco still to this day. I went a few years back. And so you've got, what's amazing, and again, it doesn't do it full justice. When you walk into the room, the eyes of Christ look at you. And no matter where you walk in the room, Christ is following you. And you feel, and it's like Jesus is saying, what are you going to do with this? What are you doing with me? In a good way, really piercing eyes. And so Jesus is rising from the dead. He's coming from the spiritual, and yet you look at his left foot on the tomb, and it's where spirituality meets the earth, right? And there's a nail's hole in his foot that he made sure to put in. And it's like, wow, the spiritual and the earthly, and that's what we are, that's what we do. Really great lesson, that you have a spiritual calling in life to worship God, to do the things God wants you to do, but you have an earthly calling. And there's the spiritual coming out in that earthly calling. Definitely, we're Christians, and it could be, from supporting this church, you're doing your earthly calling, but also your vocation, that you would, again, find the beauty that you were meant to find. And this is absolutely beautiful, the colors. The Renaissance, the colors they use are very pastel, and it's like there's this charge to life. It's a realism, but it's not photographic realism. You sense this charge to life. So that you as an individual rise up, the importance of the individual, the importance of, again, overcoming, and there's so many ways Gnosticism, we won't go into it, Gnosticism affects us and goes into us. But anyways, this is absolutely incredible, this painting. The spiritual meeting the earthly, so that you're free to think. You're not enclosed. So again, Genesis 1:31, God saw that it was good.